Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The storm began just after midnight. It came sweeping over the Scottish Highlands with the force of something ancient and wild, tearing at the towers of Hogwarts and rattling its enchanted windows. The snow fell in fierce, swirling sheets that made the sky vanish altogether. Somewhere beyond the forbidden forest, thunder cracked so loud it seemed to shake the very bones of the castle. Inside, the students of Hogwarts slept. Mostly, a few restless souls lay awake, listening to the howling wind and the eerie creak of old wood. Among them were three who would, before dawn, come to know terror and courage in equal measure. Rose Weasley sat up in her bed in the Gryffindor girls' dormitory, heart pounding. Something had pulled her from sleep, a sound, faint and strange, not the ordinary groan of a winter storm. She glanced toward the window where moonlight tried to push through the frost, and then toward her roommates, who slept on peacefully. Probably nothing, she whispered to herself. But she knew Hogwarts well enough to know that nothing was rarely the right answer. Meanwhile, several floors below, in the Slytherin dormitory beneath the lake, Scorpius Malfoy lay staring at the ceiling. The greenish light of the underwater lamps flickered oddly, casting shadows that moved like living things. He frowned, sat up, and realized with a start that the glass panel nearest his bed was vibrating, not from the storm above, but from something else. Something humming low and steady like a heartbeat deep in the walls. He swung his legs out of bed and reached for his wand. The moment he did, the lamps sputtered and died. The green glow vanished. The common room fell into complete darkness. "Lumos," Scorpius whispered. His wand tip flared to life, a trembling sphere of white. But the light seemed weaker than it should have been, as if the air itself was swallowing it. At that same instant, in a tower on the opposite side of the castle, Albus Potter, half asleep over a pile of astronomy homework, looked up in alarm as every candle in the room went out at once. His telescope gave a faint metallic shriek, and the quill in his hand twitched like it had come alive. He stumbled backward, knocking over ink, his heart racing. "Not again," he muttered. This was not the first time the castle had played tricks during storms, but something felt different tonight. The silence that followed wasn't the comfortable hush of sleeping walls. It was hollow, almost listening. Moments later, the great clock above the entrance hall struck 1. But it struck only once. The sound echoed long after it should have stopped, bouncing through corridors, down staircases, across the empty classrooms and dormitories. Then, all at once, the castle's enchanted torches flared back to life, but dimly, burning blue-white instead of gold. In Gryffindor Tower, Rose gasped. The light filtering under her door was the wrong color. She threw back the covers and pulled on her dressing gown. "Okay," she muttered, her breath misting. "That's not normal." She hurried down to the common room, her wand trembling in her hand. The fire had gone out, though no one had touched it. The armchairs stood cold and empty. For a long moment, nothing stirred, until the portrait hole opened and someone climbed through. "Rose," hissed a familiar voice. She spun around, wand raised. "Albus, Merlin's beard, you scared me." Her cousin's face was pale in the eerie light. "Sorry, did you see it too?" See what? The lights, whatever this is. The castle's gone strange. I came down to check on Professor McGonagall, but the staircases aren't moving properly. He hesitated. They keep leading back to the same corridor, like the castle's stuck. Before Rose could answer, the portrait hole opened again, this time revealing Scorpius, shivering and soaked, his Slytherin robe clinging to him. "You," Rose said, lowering her wand slightly. "How in the world did you get up here?" "I climbed," Scorpius replied breathlessly. "Or I think I did. The dungeons are flooded, not with water, something else. The magic down there's gone wrong." Albus frowned. "Gone wrong how?" "The lights are dying, the walls are humming, and..." Scorpius swallowed. "And the bloody Baron's gone." Rose blinked. "Gone? You mean... Oh, I mean gone. Vanished. The other ghosts, too. The Grey Lady's portrait fell off the wall, and there's no one left in it." The three exchanged a look. The air around them seemed colder now, heavy with some unseen presence. Then, faintly from far away, came a sound like a whispering crowd. Dozens of voices rising and falling, too soft to make out words. "Where's it coming from?" Rose breathed. Albus tilted his head. "Everywhere!" And then, as if in answer, the floor trembled beneath their feet. A crack of light split across the hearthstone, pulsing once, twice, and then nothing. The torches flickered, guttered, and went out again. In the darkness, Rose felt for Albus's hand. "What's happening?" "I don't know," he said quietly. "But something's breaking. And whatever it is, it started at Hogwarts." A sudden, sharp chime rang out, like a clock striking again. 1, the same note as before, and then again 1, over and over, echoing through the halls, as if time itself had forgotten how to count. The storm outside roared louder, and the long night began. The castle's heartbeat faltered. Then it began again, slow and uneven, echoing through the stones, like the breath of some ancient beast waking after centuries of sleep. Rose, Albus, and Scorpius stood, frozen, in the pitch-dark common room, their wands trembling faintly in their hands. Blue light pulsed through the cracks between stones, faint as moonlight underwater. The portraits on the walls had gone blank. Figures vanished, frames empty. Even the fat lady's canvas hung still and silent, her voice gone. "This isn't just a storm," Albus whispered. "Something's wrong with the magic itself." Scorpius frowned. "Magic can't just stop." "Apparently it can," Rose muttered. She took a step toward the window, brushing frost from the glass. Outside, the grounds were a whirl of snow and shadow, but what caught her breath wasn't the storm, it was the lights. Far below, scattered across the lawns, hundreds of tiny white lights burned faintly in the blizzard. Not torches, not wand light. They moved slowly, in circles like a silent procession. "Are those people?" she breathed. Albus moved beside her, squinting. "They can't be. No one's allowed outside after curfew, not in that." Scorpius's voice was flat. "They're not students. Look, no footprints in the snow." Rose turned to him sharply. "Then what are they?" He met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Echoes." Before she could ask what he meant, the floor beneath them gave a sudden lurch. The tower groaned. Somewhere deep within the castle, a sound like shattering glass rang out. The blue light that ran through the walls flared bright, blinding, and then blinked out entirely. The three students were plunged into utter blackness. "Hold on," Albus said quickly, raising his wand. "Lumos." The tip glowed, but faintly again, as if half the light refused to come. The spell flickered like a candle in a breeze. "We have to find Professor McGonagall," Rose said, gripping her wand tight. "If anyone knows what's happening, she will," Albus finished. "Agreed." But when they reached the common room door, the fat lady's portrait didn't open. Her canvas was empty, her frame cold to the touch. Scorpius muttered an incantation, but nothing happened. "It's sealed," he said, stepping back, "like the castle doesn't recognize us." Rose glanced around, then pointed to a narrow window near the corner. "We can climb out through there. There's a ledge. If we get to the next tower, maybe the staircase will still work." Albus hesitated. "You've been spending too much time with Aunt Hermione." But he followed her anyway. Together they pried open the frosted latch and climbed out into the howling night. The wind nearly threw them from the ledge. Snow whipped at their faces, freezing their breath. Below them, the white lights still drifted slowly across the grounds, like will-o'-the-wisps searching for something they had lost. "Don't look down," Rose said through chattering teeth. "I wasn't going to," Scorpius answered, though his knuckles were white where they gripped the stone. They inched along the ledge until they reached the tower's edge, where a narrow bridge joined to the next turret. But when they reached it, they found it broken clean in two. The middle had vanished entirely, replaced by empty air. "The bridge was there this morning," Albus said. "I walked across it to Transfiguration." Rose pointed. "The pieces didn't fall. They're gone, like they were never built." The storm howled around them, carrying strange, whispering voices. Not words, but the ghost of them. Too soft to understand, yet too human to ignore. Scorpius turned slowly. "We're not alone up here." From the darkness behind them, faint shapes were moving. At first, they looked like nothing more than shadows, shifting in the snow. Then one stepped closer. Its face was gray and soft, like smoke, trying to remember a form. Its eyes glowed faintly blue. Rose's wand flashed. "Expelliarmus!" The light struck through the figure and kept going. The spell passed through it harmlessly. The shadow didn't fall or flinch. It simply opened its mouth and whispered, "Time remembers." Then it was gone. "What in Merlin's name?" Albus began. But the stone beneath their feet trembled again, stronger this time. The ledge cracked, a long fissure racing along the wall. "Back inside," Rose cried. They scrambled for the window, diving through as a piece of the ledge sheared away and fell into the darkness below. Snow and shards of stone followed them inside. Rose landed hard on the common room floor. Gasping, her heart thundered. "We need to get to the library. If the wards are collapsing, there'll be a record of how to restore them. There has to be." Scorpius nodded slowly. "If we can even get there." They moved through the corridors carefully, their wands raised. The staircases had stopped shifting altogether, locked in strange, twisted positions. The portraits remained empty, the walls humming faintly under their feet. When they passed a suit of armor, its visor turned slowly to follow them. None of them spoke after that. At last they reached the library doors. They were half open, creaking softly, though no wind stirred inside. As they entered, the air changed, colder, heavier, like the weight of centuries pressed on their shoulders. The shelves loomed like dark trees, and between them something flickered. A figure in pale blue light moved silently down one of the aisles. Rose called out softly, "Madam Pince?" The figure turned, and its face was not human. It was an echo again, a ghostly reflection of a witch, long gone, her features blurred by time, But in her hand she held a book that glowed faintly gold. The Chronomancer's ledger. Scorpius breathed. It's real. The ghost's mouth moved soundlessly. Then, in a voice like wind over glass, she said, "He comes again. The Founder's shadow seeks his hour." Before any of them could speak, the book fell open of its own accord. Its pages flipped wildly until they stopped on one page, where a single sentence burned with blue fire. When the heart of time breaks, Hogwarts will remember all its yesterdays at once. And as they watched, the library around them began to change. Books vanished and reappeared. The walls flickered between centuries, new and old, crumbling and restored. They glimpsed ghostly students in ancient robes, walking past as if the trio didn't exist. For a moment they stood inside, both past and present at once. Albus's voice was tight. "We're running out of time." Literally. Scorpius nodded grimly. "Then we'd better find out what's trying to bring it back." Rose lifted the glowing book, her hands trembling. "Before Hogwarts forgets what century it's supposed to be." And outside, through the storm and the shadows, the great clock above the entrance hall struck one. Again, and again, and again. The sound of the clock carried through every corridor, a hollow toll that made the stone tremble. 1, 1, 1. Again and again, the same hour repeating. Rose pressed her hands over her ears, but the noise seemed to come from inside her bones, as if the castle itself were caught in a loop. "Time's broken," Scorpius murmured. His voice barely rose above a whisper. That's what she meant. The ghost in the library. Hogwarts is remembering its yesterdays all at once. Albus turned toward him sharply. "Then what happens when it remembers too much?" No one answered. The question hung heavy between them. The light from Rose's wand flickered as she moved deeper into the library. The glowing book, the Chronomancer's ledger, floated beside her, pages fluttering like the wings of a restless bird. Across the parchment, faint lines of text shimmered and rearranged themselves, forming words that vanished as quickly as they appeared. At last, one sentence lingered long enough to read. The hourglass of Salazar was buried beneath the great hall to bind the flow of time within the castle's walls. Rose's breath caught. The hourglass of Salazar. It's real. Albus frowned. Slytherin's relic? I thought that was a myth. Just one of those founder legends everyone exaggerates. Scorpius looked grim. My family has stories about it. My grandfather used to say Salazar created an hourglass that could trap moments, keep them from fading. But the founders sealed it away because it began feeding. Feeding? Rose repeated. On time itself, on memories. The words sent a chill through her. She looked around at the shifting shadows of the library. Some shelves were new, shining with polished wood. Others were old, splintered, thick with dust. The castle wasn't just breaking. It was becoming all its ages at once. A gust of cold swept through the aisles. Every candle in the room extinguished at once, plunging them into darkness. The only light came from the glowing book, still suspended in the air. Slowly, a new line of text burned across the page. To stop the unmaking, one must turn the glass. Turn it? Albus said. You mean flip it like a normal hourglass? Probably not that simple, Rose muttered. From the far end of the library came a sound. Soft footsteps, uneven and slow. The trio turned, wands raised. The steps drew closer, echoing across the floor. Out of the darkness came a figure, cloaked and hooded, moving with the strange stiffness of something not entirely alive. "Who's there?" Rose called. The figure stopped. Then, in a low voice that scraped like stone, it said, "The dawn will not come again." The hood fell back. The face beneath was pale and flickering as though caught between two times at once. It shifted, young, then old, then skeletal, then whole again. For an instant they saw a glimpse of a serpent sigil burned into its brow. Albus raised his wand. "Stay back." But the figure didn't move to attack. Instead, it lifted one trembling hand and pointed toward the door. "It waits beneath the hall. Find it before he does." Before any of them could ask who he was, the figure began to fade, dissolving into motes of blue light that vanished into the floor. Silence followed. Rose exhaled slowly. "I think we just met what's left of someone who tried to fix this once before." Scorpius closed to the book and tucked it under his arm. "Then we know where to go. The Great Hall." The corridors of Hogwarts were darker now. The torches burned cold, giving off no heat. The castle groaned, as if it were breathing. In some halls, they passed windows showing daylight. In others, night. One corridor led them briefly into a version of the school that looked centuries old, dusty, filled with tattered banners of founders long gone. Then, with one step, they were back in the familiar present. "Reality's coming apart," Albus muttered. "If we don't fix this soon." "Then there won't be anything left to fix," Rose finished. They descended the grand staircase, each step echoing unnaturally loud. The portraits that lined the walls were no longer empty. Figures flickered inside them, students from different centuries, some whispering, others screaming silently as the frames bent and warped. When they reached the entrance hall, they stopped short. The great hall doors stood open. Inside, the candles that usually floated above the long tables hung motionless in midair, each one frozen in a droplet of solid flame. The ceiling still mirrored the storm outside, but the snow fell in slow motion, each flake hanging like glass. At the center of the hall, the floor was split open by a crack that ran the length of the stone, glowing faintly blue. Rose's voice was a whisper. "That's it." They crossed the hall carefully, stepping around the crack. As they drew near, they saw something glimmering in the depths below, a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "Since when does Hogwarts have a staircase under the Great Hall?" Albus murmured. "It doesn't," Scorpius said quietly. "Not in our time." They descended. The steps wound down into the earth, slick with condensation. The deeper they went, the older the stones became, first polished, then rough-hewn, then ancient, carved with serpentine runes. At the bottom lay a vast chamber. Its walls were lined with statues of the founders, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and there, in the shadows, towered the figure of Salazar Slytherin. His stone eyes glowed faintly green, and in his hands he held an enormous hourglass, filled not with sand, but with swirling light and shadow. The glass pulsed like a living thing. Rose stepped forward, her voice trembling. "That's it. The hourglass of Salazar." The air around it shimmered, thick with magic, so old it seemed alive. Every few seconds, the light inside the hourglass would twist violently, then reverse direction, flowing upward instead of down. "Time's trapped," Albus said softly, "and it's fighting itself." They circled the relic, searching for any sign of how to turn it. But the moment Scorpius reached out, the ground shuddered. The statues lining the walls shifted, their stone heads turning to face the intruders. Then, one by one, they stepped down from their pedestals. "Run!" Rose shouted. The trio darted toward the stairs, but the air thickened around them. The statues moved with terrible grace, their eyes glowing like molten gold. Behind them, the hourglass flared, and for an instant, Rose saw not stone, but real figures, alive. The founders of Hogwarts stood before them. Gryffindor's eyes burned with firelight. Hufflepuff's face was calm but sorrowful. Ravenclaw's gaze was sharp as lightning, and Salazar Slytherin's smile was cold and thin. "You trespass upon time itself," he said, his voice deep and echoing through the chamber. "Do you know what you seek to mend?" Rose swallowed hard. "We're trying to save Hogwarts, to stop it from breaking apart." "Foolish child," said Salazar. "Hogwarts cannot die. It can only remember." Then his hand lifted, and the hourglass turned by his will. The light inside it flared white, and the world vanished. When Rose opened her eyes, the chamber was gone. She stood in the great hall again, but it was no longer the present. The banners above her bore symbols she'd never seen. Students in robes of strange cut filled the benches, murmuring softly. A voice echoed from the staff table, calm and commanding. "Welcome, first years," said Salazar Slytherin. Rose realized with horror they were standing inside Hogwarts past, and the dawn they were trying to survive was still centuries away. The air shimmered like heat, rising from stone, and then settled into stillness. Rose stood among the enchanted candles of the great hall, but their light was softer, older somehow, like a dream remembered rather than lived. The tables were polished dark wood, unscarred by the centuries of meals and mischief she knew. The walls glowed faintly with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames mirrored in goblets and silver plates that gleamed untouched. The students filling the hall were not from her world. Their robes were strange, simpler, clasped with bronze and leather instead of house colors. Their wands were crude, gnarled, and thick as branches, and at the high table sat the 4 founders. Godric Gryffindor, with his broad shoulders and a mane of auburn hair like firelight. Helga Hufflepuff, warm-eyed and serene, her hands folded before her. Rowena Ravenclaw, regal and sharp, her gaze sweeping the hall as if she saw everything, past, present, and beyond. And beside them sat Salazar Slytherin, his pale hands resting upon the table, his eyes gleaming like a serpent watching prey. No one seemed to notice Rose, Albus, or Scorpius standing in the aisle between the tables. The air had a dreamlike stillness, a sense that they were ghosts passing unseen through a memory too old to change. "Are we really here?" Albus whispered. Scorpius looked around slowly. "No, we're not. We're seeing what Hogwarts remembers." The hall quieted as Rowena Ravenclaw rose. "Tonight," she said, her voice carrying with effortless power, "we dedicate our work to what will outlive us, a sanctuary for learning and unity, protected by the oldest of magics." Her eyes lingered on Salazar, and a shadow crossed her face. "Let all who dwell within its walls be bound by faith in wisdom and friendship." Salazar inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Wisdom, yes. Friendship?" His smile was thin. "That is a fragile enchantment." Rose stepped closer, her breath quick. "This must be the founding," she murmured. "We're seeing the night Hogwarts began." But as Salazar's gaze lifted, his eyes turned straight toward her. Rose froze. He should not have seen her. None of them should have. But Slytherin's eyes locked onto hers, cold and sharp as steel. "You do not belong here," he said softly. The hall fell silent, and suddenly every face turned toward the trio. The dreamlike haze shattered. The students' whispers became sound. The torches flared bright, and reality snapped tight around them. Rose stumbled backward. He sees us. He really sees us. The founders rose from their seats, magic crackling in the air. Gryffindor's sword shimmered at his hip. Hufflepuff's wand was already drawn. Ravenclaw's eyes narrowed. What trickery is this? "We're not enemies," Albus shouted, stepping forward. "Please, something terrible has happened to Hogwarts. We need your help." Slytherin moved first. His wand was in his hand before any of them saw him draw it. "Lies. You carry no magic of this age." The air split with the sound of his spell. Green light flashed toward Albus, who barely dove aside. The curse struck a column, turning it to dust. "Stop!" Rose cried, raising her wand. "We're not here to harm anyone." But the Founder's magic was unlike anything they had faced. Every word they spoke carried the weight of ancient power. Not taught, but born. The air roared with energy. Spells flared and collided, spraying light across the walls. Scorpius shouted, "Rose, the hourglass must find the hourglass." Through the chaos, she saw it, standing at the end of the hall on a pedestal of stone. Its glass was larger now, its sands glowing with molten silver. The light inside churned, mirroring the battle's fury. Rose sprinted toward it. A curse scorched the floor beside her, and she threw up a shield just in time. The spell hit like a hammer, shattering her protection, but she kept moving. The moment her hands touched the hourglass, the room exploded with light. Everything froze. Sound vanished. The torches stopped flickering. Even the Founders were still, caught mid-motion, their eyes locked in the glare of magic suspended in time. The light in the hourglass spun faster, swirling like a storm. It rose in a column, wrapping around Rose and lifting her from the ground. Her mind flooded with images. Flashes of Hogwarts through the centuries, students in robes of every color, laughter echoing down corridors, battles fought, spells cast, the castle rebuilt and repaired 1,000 times. Then a voice spoke inside her head. "Turn the glass. But beware what follows, for to turn back time is to let it see you." She gasped. "Who's there?" The voice did not answer. The glow dimmed and gravity returned. Rose landed hard beside the hourglass, her heart pounding. Albus and Scorpius ran to her. The great hall was empty now. No students, no Founders, no battle. The storm still raged beyond the enchanted ceiling, but the rest was silence. "What happened?" Albus asked. "I think I saw the moment Hogwarts was born," Rose said breathlessly, "and the magic that holds it together. The hourglass keeps the castle bound to time. If it breaks, Hogwarts starts to unravel." Scorpius looked at the hourglass warily. "Then we need to turn it before it destroys itself." Rose hesitated. The warning still rang in her ears. "If we turn it, something will come for us, something that sees." Albus set his jaw. "Then we'll be ready for it." They stepped closer together. Each of them placed a hand on the glass. It was cold, yet alive beneath their fingers, pulsing like a heartbeat. "1," Rose whispered. "2," said Scorpius. "3," cried Albus. They turned it. The light exploded outward. For a heartbeat, everything stopped again. But this time the air filled with sound. Screams, whispers, and the low rhythmic ticking of 1,000 unseen clocks. The hourglass whirled, spilling its silver sands upward in a storm of magic that filled the great hall. The walls stretched and cracked, flashing between ages, stone, marble, ruin, then whole again. The castle groaned like a living creature. Then, from the far end of the hall, a shape began to form. At first it was only shadow, tall, thin, cloaked in smoke, but as the light dimmed, the figure solidified. It had no face, only the outline of one, and eyes like twin stars burning through darkness. When it spoke, its voice echoed with countless others, like time itself was answering. "I am what remains when hours die," it said. "You have turned the glass." Rose's stomach dropped. "What are you?" The figure stepped forward. With each movement, its body flickered, young, old, ancient, unborn. "I am the shadow left behind by Salazar's last spell. I am the memory of his will." The trio backed away, wands raised. The hourglass between them glowed brighter, straining against the figure's presence. Scorpius whispered, "It's trying to take it back." "Then we don't let it," Albus said. They braced as the figure's hand lifted, and the air shattered into shards of glass-like light. Magic screamed through the hall, warping the air. The hourglass pulsed once more, and the storm outside roared in answer. Rose shouted above the noise, "We turned it, but it's not stopping. It's feeding on the energy." "Then we stop it," Albus cried, firing a stunning spell that vanished into the shadow's body like smoke. The entity laughed, a terrible, echoing sound. "You cannot banish what was never alive." And then it lunged. The hall erupted into chaos. Spells flying, shadows twisting, the sound of the clock still tolling that same endless note. 1, 1, 1. The night was far from over. The shadow struck with the fury of a storm breaking through stone. It moved without shape, sliding across the air like ink spilled into water. Rose threw herself to the side as its hand, if such it could be called, raked the floor, leaving behind black cracks that hissed like burning coals. The sound of the clock pounded through the hall, relentless, the same note repeating, 1, 1, 1. Albus raised his wand. "Protego Maxima!" A shield flared into existence around them, a dome of trembling gold light. The shadow crashed into it, and the spell shuddered, but held for a moment. Then the light thinned, peeling away like mist in the wind. "It's draining magic," Scorpius shouted. "Every spell we cast, it drinks it." "Then we'll give it something it can't swallow," Rose said, her voice fierce. She turned toward the hourglass. The silver sands inside were spinning faster, a whirlwind of light caught between glass walls. "We use this. It's the heart of Hogwarts time, if we can redirect it." Albus cut her off. "We don't even know what it'll do. We don't have a choice." The shadow lunged again, slamming against the half-broken shield. This time the barrier shattered like glass, and the air rippled with the force of the blast. The trio were thrown backward. Rose hit the ground hard, her wand clattering away. She gasped, dazed, and saw the creature looming over Scorpius. It reached for him, its hand closing around his shoulder, and he cried out as frost crept across his skin, his face blurred, his age shifting in a heartbeat from boy to old man, and back again. "Let him go!" Rose screamed. She seized her wand and fired the first spell that came to her lips. "Lumos Solis." The tip of her wand blazed like the sun. The shadow shrieked, its form tearing apart under the sudden brilliance. For a moment, Rose thought it had gone, but then she realized it had only retreated, reforming near the far wall. "It fears light," Scorpius gasped, clutching his shoulder. "It's made of the dark between moments." Albus turned toward the hourglass, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "Then we light up the whole hall." He pointed his wand at the enchanted candles above. Incendio altus. Fire roared to life, blazing through the ceiling. The sky above, still reflecting the storm outside, became a storm of flame and snow. The shadow screamed again, but even as it faltered, the hourglass pulsed brighter, absorbing both the fire and the darkness. The floor shook, the stones beneath them split, and from the cracks rose streams of blue-white light, magic bleeding from the castle itself. "Rose," Scorpius said hoarsely, "if we don't stop this, the whole castle will tear itself apart." "I know," her eyes fixed on the hourglass. "We have to reset it completely, turn it again, but together this time." Albus glanced between them. "We do that, and it might pull us into time itself." Rose met his eyes. "Then we'll find our way back." The shadow shrieked again, gathering itself into a vast whirlpool of darkness. Its voice filled the hall. "You cannot end what was begun by the founder. The circle must remain unbroken." Rose ignored it. She ran to the pedestal, the boys following. The hourglass towered above them, its surface alive with rivers of silver and shadow. Together they pressed their hands to the glass. The moment they touched it, cold magic surged through them like ice and lightning at once. Rose cried out but didn't pull away. "Now!" They turned the hourglass. The sound that followed wasn't thunder or shattering. It was silence. Absolute, crushing silence, so complete that even their thoughts seemed to echo. The world folded inward and Hogwarts vanished. They stood in nothing. A gray mist surrounded them, endless and shifting. Shapes drifted at the edges of vision, memories, fragments of time. Rose saw her mother laughing in the Burrows' kitchen. She saw Albus as a small boy chasing a snitch through the orchard. She saw Scorpius alone in the library, studying by candlelight. Then the visions changed. Older, deeper. The founders standing together in the great hall, their faces drawn, and behind them stood Salazar Slytherin. This was not the memory they had seen before. His expression was no longer proud but haunted. His voice, when he spoke, trembled with regret. "I have bound the magic too tightly," he said to the others. "The hourglass feeds on itself. If it ever turns again, it will tear Hogwarts from time." Ravenclaw's eyes were sharp. "Then it must never be touched." Slytherin bowed his head. "One day it will turn, and when it does, my shadow will wake to guard it. Pray that those who find it are wise enough to end what I began." The vision faded, leaving only the gray void. Rose whispered, "He didn't mean for this to happen. He left a guardian to protect it, not destroy us." Albus's eyes widened. "Then that thing, it's his shadow, bound to keep the hourglass safe." "Except it's been trapped for centuries," Scorpius said. "All it knows is to stop anyone who touches the glass. It's forgotten its purpose." The mist trembled. The shadow began to form again before them, flickering like smoke caught in the wind. Its voice was weaker now. "Time cannot begin again without a price." Rose stepped forward. "Then take mine." Albus grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" "If the hourglass needs a life to reset, it'll be mine. Hogwarts can't survive another collapse." But the shadow shook its head. "Not life. Memory. The turning must be paid with what was." Rose hesitated. "Memory?" Scorpius understood first. "It means one of us will forget everything." The shadow's voice softened, almost kind. "One must walk away not knowing why." Albus looked between them, his expression torn. "No, there has to be another way." Rose's eyes glistened, but she smiled faintly. "You both need to remember, to tell them what happened. Before they could stop her, she placed her hand upon the hourglass. The glass shone like dawn breaking. "No!" Albus shouted. "Rose!" Light burst around her, flooding the void with color. The shadow reached out, not in anger this time, but in blessing. "It is done." The mist dissolved. The hall returned. The storm outside had quieted. The clock struck 2 for the first time in hours. Rose stood at the center of the great hall, her eyes dazed. Albus and Scorpius ran to her. "Rose? Are you all right?" She blinked at them, confused. "Who are you?" Albus's breath caught. "Oh no." Scorpius closed his eyes, grief tightening his voice. She paid the price. The hourglass stood quiet now, its sands flowing gently, peacefully. The blue light in the cracks of the castle faded. The portraits on the walls whispered again. The ghosts returned, their voices like sighs of relief. Hogwarts lived. Rose turned toward the hourglass, frowning slightly. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "Do you think it's always been here?" Albus swallowed hard. "Yeah, for as long as anyone can remember." And somewhere deep within the castle, unseen by any of them, a faint echo of a voice lingered. Slytherin's voice carried through time itself. "Guard the dawn, and Hogwarts shall endure." Outside, the first light of morning touched the towers. The long night was over, but for one of them the memory of it was already gone. Hogwarts breathed again, ancient and alive, waiting for the next dawn, and whatever would come after. The sun rose over Hogwarts as though reluctant to touch the castle's trembling towers. Dawn bled slowly into the gray sky, and snow fell more gently now, soft as ash. The long night had ended, but the world it left behind felt fragile, changed. In the great hall, the hourglass stood silent upon its pedestal, its silver sands drifting calmly from one chamber to the other. The faint hum that had haunted the castle was gone. Portraits whispered to one another again. Ghosts reappeared through walls, and torches burned with warm, golden light. To any observer, Hogwarts seemed safe, restored, but those who had lived through the night's horror knew otherwise. Albus Potter sat at one of the long tables staring at his untouched breakfast. His hands were clasped tightly, his eyes shadowed. Scorpius Malfoy sat opposite him, silent as well. Between them, Rose Weasley laughed softly at something a younger student said, her eyes bright and untroubled. She didn't remember a thing. The laughter cut through Albus like a blade. He forced a smile whenever she looked his way, pretending that all was well. But the memory of her standing before the hourglass, of the light swallowing her, would not fade. Every time she spoke, her voice rang with the innocence of someone who had never seen time break apart. Scorpius leaned forward, his voice low. "She doesn't even sense it." Albus shook his head. "Not a trace. It's like the night never happened for her. Maybe that's mercy. Or punishment." Across the hall, Professor McGonagall entered, her robes sweeping behind her. She looked older that morning, her face drawn and weary, though her eyes held the same iron steadiness as always. When she reached their table, she paused, studying them both. "I assume," she said quietly, "you boys were involved in the disturbance last night." Scorpius stiffened. "You know?" The wards recorded something. A surge of old magic under the great hall. The entire castle woke me at once. Her gaze softened, just slightly. "Whatever happened, it's finished now, but Hogwarts remembers." Albus glanced at Rose, who was chatting cheerfully with a Ravenclaw nearby. "Not everyone does." McGonagall followed his eyes and nodded slowly. There are spells that take memories, rare, ancient ones. If she bears the cost for what was done, she will need friends to anchor her. Do you understand me? Yes, Professor, Albus said. The headmistress turned to leave but stopped. Potter, Malfoy. Her tone shifted, softer still. I do not need to know the details, but I do know courage when I see it. Whatever was done, thank you. She left them to the silence. Rose turned, her hair catching the morning light. What's everyone looking so gloomy about? Nothing, Albus said quickly. Just tired. She smiled, bright and unknowing. You always look tired, Al. Scorpius laughed under his breath. Some things never change. They left the hall together once breakfast ended, the three of them walking toward the courtyard. The snow crunched underfoot, and the air smelled sharp and new. Rose ran ahead, throwing snowballs at statues, her laughter ringing through the cold morning. Albus and Scorpius followed slowly, both watching her, both lost in thought. Do you think she'll ever remember? Scorpius asked at last. Albus's eyes followed Rose as she spun in the snow. I don't know. Maybe she's not meant to. They crossed the courtyard and paused beneath an archway where the frost still clung to the stone. From here, they could see the great hall windows, still faintly glowing with morning light. For a moment, Albus thought he saw something move behind the glass, a flicker, a shimmer of silver, but when he blinked, it was gone. That night, as the castle settled into uneasy peace, Rose sat alone in the library. She couldn't explain why she'd come, only that something had drawn her there, a quiet tug in her chest. The place was almost empty, the candles burning low, the scent of parchment thick in the air. Her eyes wandered along the shelves until they caught on a single book that didn't belong. Its spine shimmered faintly with a silver sheen. The chronomancer's ledger. She frowned. The title meant nothing to her, yet when she reached for it, her fingers trembled as though remembering something her mind could not. The moment she opened it, a soft whisper filled her ears. Not words exactly. More like a sigh, the faintest echo of a promise. Rose turned a page. When the heart of time breaks, Hogwarts will remember all its yesterdays at once. The sentence glowed faintly just for an instant before fading back into ink. Her breath caught. She didn't know why, but those words made her chest ache. Somewhere deep inside, beyond memory or dream, a part of her stirred. She closed the book carefully and replaced it on the shelf. Behind her, the portraits on the walls murmured quietly to one another, as if aware of something she was not. The torches flickered, though there was no draft. Rose turned toward the door, and for a moment she thought she saw someone standing there, a boy with dark hair and green eyes, watching her silently. Albus? She called, but the figure faded before her eyes, leaving only empty air. Rose blinked, confused. Strange. When she returned to Gryffindor Tower, she found Albus waiting by the fire. He smiled at her, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Couldn't sleep? Not really, she admitted, curling up in one of the armchairs. You ever get the feeling you've forgotten something important? Something right on the edge of your mind? Albus's smile faltered. All the time. Rose gazed into the fire. I went to the library. There was a book, something about time. I don't know why, but it felt familiar. He looked into the flames, his throat tight. Maybe you just have a good memory for strange things. Maybe. She smiled faintly, then yawned. Good night, Al. When she'd gone, Albus sat alone for a long time. The fire crackled softly, and outside the snow began to fall again. He reached into his robes and drew out a small fragment of glass, a splinter from the hourglass that had shattered when Rose turned it. It gleamed faintly, pulsing once like a heartbeat. He held it until dawn touched the windows, then hid it away. Weeks passed. Classes resumed. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the castle never quite felt the same. Sometimes corridors led to places they shouldn't. A door that had been locked for centuries would stand ajar. Once, Rose found an old hourglass pendant on her pillow, filled with silver dust. She asked Albus and Scorpius if they'd left it there, but they only shook their heads. And far below in the depths beneath the great hall, the great hourglass of Salazar stood once more in silence. Yet for those who listened closely, a faint ticking could still be heard, a heartbeat beneath the stone. It was not the sound of danger, not yet, but it was a reminder. Magic like that did not sleep forever, and sometimes the past was not content to remain forgotten. Winter melted slowly from the grounds of Hogwarts, and with each passing day the castle seemed to breathe easier. The frost left the windows, the lake thawed, and the scent of damp earth rose from the forbidden forest. Yet beneath this quiet renewal, something ancient still lingered, unseen but watchful. To most, it was a peaceful season. Lessons resumed, Quidditch practices filled the afternoons, and laughter once more echoed through the corridors. But for Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy, peace had become a stranger. They had survived the night that time itself broke. But the weight of what they'd witnessed did not fade. At odd moments the castle would whisper, a clock would skip a second forward, or a staircase would shift in the wrong direction, as though testing the shape of the world it had nearly lost. And then there was Rose. She had changed in small, unsettling ways. Not that anyone else noticed. She was still bright, clever, kind. But every so often her laughter would falter, her gaze turning distant like someone hearing a tune only she could remember. Albus saw it most clearly during Transfiguration one morning. Professor Chang was explaining the intricacies of vanishing spells, her voice calm but sharp when Rose froze mid-spell. Her wand hovered over the matchstick she was meant to vanish, but her eyes, they were fixed on something far away. "Rose?" the professor asked gently. Rose blinked, startled. "Sorry, Professor, I thought I heard someone." The rest of the class chuckled. Chang smiled kindly. "The matchstick, Miss Weasley, not your imagination." But when the lesson ended, Albus caught up to her in the corridor. "Who did you hear?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "It sounds mad, but it was like someone whispering my name. I can't explain it. It felt familiar, like I used to know the voice." Albus's stomach turned cold. "Rose? Maybe you should talk to McGonagall." She shook her head. "No, it's nothing. Just dreams creeping into daylight, that's all." But Albus knew better. Dreams didn't leave faint traces of silver light in someone's hair when the sunlight hit just right. That night, he went to the library alone. The castle was silent, save for the hum of magic that never truly slept. He made his way to the restricted section where the shadows seemed thicker than the air itself. He lit his wand. Lumos. The beam of light swept across shelves filled with forbidden books, grimoires bound in scales, scrolls sealed with wax so old it had turned to stone. He moved carefully, reading titles until he found what he was searching for. The Founder's Artifacts, a chronicle of lost Magic. He carried it to a table and opened it with care. The pages were heavy, the ink faint with age. He turned them one by one until a familiar illustration made his heart stop. The Hourglass of Salazar. The text beneath it read, "The hourglass was forged by Salazar Slytherin to bind time within Hogwarts. In turning it, one could renew or unravel the flow of hours. But it was said that the glass held within it not sand, but the memory of the castle itself, and that whoever touched its heart might leave a part of themselves behind." Albus exhaled shakily. So it was true. Rose hadn't merely lost a memory. She had given it to the castle. He closed the book. The floor beneath him shivered faintly as though agreeing. Behind him a voice whispered, "You were not meant to look." Albus spun, his wand raised. "Who's there?" A figure stood between the shelves, faint, translucent, yet unmistakably human. Its robes shimmered with faint green, and its eyes glowed silver. "Salazar," Albus breathed. The ghost inclined his head. "You turn the glass, and the debt remains. Time remembers its saviors even when they do not remember themselves." Albus swallowed hard. "What debt? Rose did what had to be done. She saved Hogwarts." "Yes," said Slytherin's shadow, "but the hourglass does not forget a life touched by it. It is still bound to her. Even now the castle whispers her name, not in gratitude, but in hunger. The glass calls her back." Albus's heart pounded. "What does that mean?" "It means," said the ghost, "that before the year ends, she will return to it. Willingly or not." The candles flickered. When Albus looked again, the founder's shade was gone. He ran from the library, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridors. The next morning, Rose didn't come to breakfast. He found her later on the astronomy tower, standing by the parapet, her hair whipping in the wind. Snowflakes swirled around her, though the sky was clear. Her hand was outstretched, palm upward, and in it lay a tiny shard of silver glass. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, breathless. She turned, startled. "It was in my pocket. I don't know how it got there." Albus's stomach twisted. "That's a piece of the hourglass. Don't touch it." She frowned. "You're scaring me." "I'm not trying to," he said, stepping closer. "But something's happening to you, Rose. The castle isn't finished with what you gave it." She looked down at the shard, and for a moment her reflection stared back at her. But older, pale, and afraid. She gasped and dropped it. The fragment shattered, and the sound was not like glass breaking, but like a bell tolling deep underground. The air around them thickened. The sunlight dimmed, replaced by cold gray. Albus grabbed her hand. "We have to go." They ran from the tower, the sound of the tolling bell following them, faint but steady. When they reached the entrance hall, Scorpius was already there, pale and shaken. "I felt it," he said before Albus could speak. "The hourglass, it stirred." Rose clutched her head. "I can hear it again. The whispers." A chill passed through the floor, spreading outward. The torches flickered blue. Scorpius drew his wand. "We can't let it wake again. If the hourglass breaks a second time..." He didn't finish. The sound came again, that same dreadful note that had once filled the castle. 1, 1, 1. And this time it wasn't the clock. "It's calling," Rose whispered. "It wants me back." Albus turned to her, his expression fierce. "Then we're going to stop it." Together. They ran for the great hall. The doors opened before them with a crash of wind and light. The hourglass stood exactly as before, silver sands falling slowly. But now, cracks ran through its surface, glowing faintly blue. The magic they had bound was waking once more, and the dawn they thought they had saved was already fading into shadow. The great hall lay silent when they entered, yet not the silence of calm. It was the stillness before a storm, the kind that made even the air hesitate to breathe. The enchanted ceiling above had darkened to an unbroken gray, though it was midday outside. The floating candles were frozen, their flames unmoving, suspended in midair like drops of amber. At the far end of the hall stood the hourglass of Salazar. Its surface had changed. The cracks along its body pulsed faintly, threads of light crawling through them like veins beneath skin. The sands inside, silver once, now glimmered with both light and shadow, turning sluggishly as if the weight of time itself were growing too heavy to bear. Rose stared, her face pale. "I thought it was sealed." "It was," said Scorpius, his wand drawn. "You sealed it, Rose. You gave it what it needed." Albus shook his head. "Then why is it breaking again?" Scorpius's voice was grim. "Because magic that feeds on sacrifice always hungers for more." The air around the hourglass rippled, distorting the space like heat above fire. Rose felt it call to her, a deep pull in her chest, as though a piece of herself were trapped inside and struggling to return. She took a step forward before she realized what she was doing. Albus caught her wrist. "Don't. I can feel it," she whispered. "It's alive." Behind them, the doors of the hall slammed shut with a sound that echoed like thunder. The torches guttered, then went out completely. The only light came from the hourglass, its glow casting long shadows that twisted and writhed across the floor. "Something's here," Scorpius murmured. A low hum filled the room, faint at first, but growing louder, resonant, until it trembled in their bones. From the darkness around the walls, shapes began to emerge, not human, but echoes, hazy and half-formed. They flickered between centuries, students, teachers, even ghosts of those long dead, each appearing for a heartbeat before fading again. "The castle's memories," Albus breathed. "It's bleeding them back into the world." The hourglass pulsed, and one of the phantoms solidified. It was the shadow they had faced before, the remnant of Salazar's will. But this time it was whole. Cloaked in darkness, its form had substance, its eyes no longer hollow, but burning with green fire. "You return," it said, its voice like the grinding of old stone. "The circle turns once more." Albus stepped forward, wand raised. "We stopped you once." The shadow tilted its head. "You delayed me, but time cannot be denied its due." Its gaze slid toward Rose. "She belongs to me. Her memory fills the glass. Without it, the flow of hours falters. She must return." Rose took a step back. "No, you're lying." "I do not lie," the shadow hissed. "You hear it, do you not? The voice that whispers when you dream? That is the part of you that remains within the glass. You cannot live apart from your own soul forever." Scorpius's hand tightened on his wand. "We'll find another way to fix it." "There is no other way," the shadow said. When the hourglass cracked, a bond was forged between her and the castle. She is its heart now. The glass calls not to consume her, but to complete her. Rose's voice trembled. "If I go back into it, you will become what I am," it said softly. "A keeper of time, neither alive nor lost, eternal." The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. Albus shook his head violently. "No, I won't let that happen." He pointed his wand at the hourglass. Reducto. The blast of light struck its surface, but instead of shattering, the magic bent around it and returned. The spell slammed into the floor, carving a crater in the flagstones. "Stop!" Rose cried. "You'll make it worse." The shadow raised its arms and a wave of cold spread outward. The images of Hogwarts past flickered faster now. The founders at their feast, the Battle of Hogwarts, students walking, laughing, dying, all overlapping, bleeding into one another until time itself seemed to tremble. Scorpius gritted his teeth. "It's unraveling again." Rose clutched her head. Whispers filled her mind. Thousands of voices overlapping, echoing through centuries. "Help us. Remember us. Keep us." The hourglass called to her more insistently, its pulse matching her heartbeat. She sank to her knees. "I can't hold it out," she gasped. Albus knelt beside her. "Listen to me, Rose. You don't owe it anything. You saved Hogwarts once already. You don't need to give it more." She looked at him, tears bright in her eyes. "It's not asking. It's pleading. The castle's afraid, Albus. It doesn't want to die." The shadow's voice filled the hall again. "One turn, and all will be as it was. She will not vanish. She will become part of everything." Albus's voice rose in fury. "You mean she'll be trapped? Forever is merely another word for safe. Not for her." The shadow extended its hand, and the air warped around it. The hourglass lifted from its pedestal, floating above them, its sands spinning faster. The ground shook, the walls cracked. Scorpius shouted, "If it fuses with her, the castle will stabilize, but she'll be gone." Rose rose to her feet slowly, her hair lifting in the charged air. "If I don't, Hogwarts will collapse. Everyone inside will die." Albus grabbed her arm. "We'll find another way." She smiled faintly. "You always say that." Then she turned toward the hourglass. The shadow moved with her, its form twisting like smoke. "Yes, come." But Albus lunged forward, pulling her back. "You're not taking her." The shadow struck. Its hands swept through the air, and Albus was thrown across the room, slamming into the far wall. His wand fell from his hand and skittered away. Scorpius fired a volley of spells, each deflected effortlessly. The hourglass's glow intensified until the hall was awash in white light. Rose's voice was barely a whisper. "It's all right. I think this is what was meant to happen." Albus struggled to rise. "Rose, please don't." But she had already reached the floating relic. The instant her fingertips touched the glass, the light swallowed her whole. A surge of power exploded outward, shattering the remaining candles, blowing open the doors of the hall. The shadow screamed, a terrible echoing sound, and then it dissolved, torn apart by the force of its own creation. When the brilliance faded, the hourglass was whole again. Its surface gleamed, perfect, without a single crack. Inside, the silver sands flowed calmly. But Rose was gone. Albus staggered forward, his eyes wide. "No?" Scorpius joined him, staring at the relic in silence. Then, faintly within the swirling sands, a shape appeared. A figure with hair like copper and eyes like sunlight through mist. She smiled. "She's alive," Scorpius whispered. "Not alive," Albus said hoarsely. "She's part of it." The hourglass pulsed once as if in answer, and then fell still. The storm outside ceased. The ceiling of the hall cleared, revealing a pale blue sky. Hogwarts breathed again. Yet from that day on, whenever the castle's clocks struck dawn, a faint echo followed, a soft, almost musical chime that no one could explain. Those who lingered in the great hall at that hour sometimes thought they saw a shimmer in the hourglass, or heard a girl's voice whisper gently through the air, just until dawn. And somewhere in the heart of the castle, the magic that had bound them all continued to turn. A memory of sacrifice, eternal as time itself. Spring deepened across the Scottish hills, yet within Hogwarts the air still carried a weight that no warmth could lift. The castle had survived, yes, but it had changed. Some nights students woke to find their dormitory clocks running backward for a heartbeat before resuming their steady tick. Quills wrote faint echoes of words that had never been spoken. The portraits whispered names long forgotten. And always, when the dawn bells rang, that second note followed, a lingering chime like the sigh of glass. Albus Potter had stopped sleeping well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the light again. Rose, standing before the hourglass, her face calm, her hair blazing with reflected silver. The memory came like a wound that would not close. He threw himself into his studies, determined not to think. Yet the castle would not let him forget. In transfiguration, the shadows of the desks stretched too long. In charms, his spells hummed faintly, resonating with some distant rhythm. Even Scorpius noticed it. "She's still here, you know," Scorpius said one afternoon as they sat by the lake. The spring sun shimmered on the water, but its reflection broke oddly, fractured into slow-turning rings of light. Albus stared across the lake toward the castle's towers. "I know, I feel it." "Then we need to let her go." He didn't answer. The truth was he couldn't. Letting go felt like betrayal. For a while they sat in silence, the breeze stirring the reeds. A group of first years laughed nearby, their shouts echoing across the water. It should have sounded ordinary, comforting. Instead, it seemed far away, as if belonging to another world. That evening, Albus went back to the great hall. The torches were dimmed for supper, the ceiling dark and full of stars. Only a few students lingered, talking softly over half-finished meals. No one seemed to notice him approach the far end where the hourglass stood. He stood before it, heart thudding. It was beautiful, terrifyingly so. Smooth and perfect, its surface gleamed like polished starlight. The sands within fell in slow, unhurried streams, never ending, and if he looked closely enough, he could almost see her. "Rose," he whispered. For a moment he thought he heard an answer, faint like breath against glass. He reached out, his fingertips barely brushing the surface. The glass felt warm, pulsing faintly beneath his touch. Then came the whisper again, clearer this time. "You shouldn't be here." Albus froze. "Rose?" The light inside the hourglass shifted, swirling faster. A faint shape took form. Not her face this time, but her shadow, wavering like a reflection seen through water. "It's all right, Albus." He stepped closer. "We can bring you back. There must be a way." The sands flared, a brilliant white. The shadow shook its head. "No. If you break the glass, the castle will fall again. Hogwarts lives through me now." "I don't care. You don't belong trapped in there." The whisper softened. "It's not a prison. It's peace. The castle is quiet again. The voices are sleeping." He pressed a hand harder to the glass, desperation rising in him. "Then let me stay with you." "You can't. Time won't allow it. You have to live. Without you? The sands slowed. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then her voice came again, barely audible. Just until dawn, remember? That was the promise. The light dimmed, and the shadow faded away. The hourglass returned to its steady rhythm, silent once more. Albus sank to his knees, the weight of the silence crushing him. He stayed there until long after the torches had burned low. When he finally rose, Scorpius was waiting near the doors. You went to her again, didn't you? Albus didn't answer. Scorpius sighed. You can't keep doing this. She made her choice. If you keep touching that thing, you'll draw the magic out again. You'll undo what she died for. She didn't die. Scorpius's gaze softened. She might as well have. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Albus whispered, She said time wouldn't allow me to stay. What if time could be bent again? Not broken, just turned back. Scorpius paled. You're not serious. There has to be a way. There isn't. The hourglass nearly destroyed everything. You think meddling with it again would help? Albus's eyes gleamed with a stubborn fire that reminded Scorpius uncomfortably of Harry Potter in every story he'd ever read. If it means I can bring her back, yes. Albus. But Albus was already walking away, the echo of his footsteps lost in the vastness of the hall. Weeks passed. Strange things began to happen again. Nothing catastrophic, not yet, but enough for rumors to spread. The portraits whispered that someone had been sneaking into the great hall at night. The clocks in the towers chimed at odd hours. One morning, the sky over the castle flickered between dawn and dusk 3 times before settling. And each time it happened, the sands inside the hourglass moved faster. Scorpius knew. He confronted Albus one night by the lake under the pale light of the half moon. You're doing this, he said flatly. Albus didn't deny it. I'm trying to reach her. You'll bring the castle down again. I'll stop before that happens. You won't? Scorpius's voice broke. You can't let go. I know because I can't either, but we have to try. Rose wouldn't want this. Albus looked up at the stars. She wanted to live. Scorpius closed his eyes. And you'll tear time apart chasing a ghost. Albus turned, anger flashing across his face. You didn't see her. You didn't hear her. She's still there. The night wind carried the sound of the lake against the shore, the soft whisper of waves. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Then faintly from the direction of the castle came a sound neither had heard in months. A chime, soft and clear, echoing across the grounds. Albus's eyes widened. She's calling me. He ran. Scorpius shouted after him, but the words vanished in the dark. By the time Scorpius reached the great hall, the doors were already open. The hourglass glowed with fierce light, the sands spinning in violent circles. Albus stood before it, his wand raised, tears streaking his face. Rose, he shouted, if you can hear me, just one more moment. The light flared, brighter than before, filling the hall with blinding radiance. Scorpius shielded his eyes. Through the glow, a faint figure appeared. Rose, her hand pressed to the glass from within. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then, as the sands surged upward, a crack split the glass. The floor shook, the ceiling rippled between night and day. The castle groaned. Scorpius lunged forward. Albus, stop! Albus hesitated. Rose's face in the glass changed. Not pleading, not fearful, but calm, almost smiling. Then, from the depths of the light, her voice came clear and strong. "Let me go." The spell died on Albus's lips. The hourglass pulsed once, twice, and then the light dimmed. The crack sealed itself, the sands falling slow again. The storm ceased. Albus fell to his knees. "I heard her," he whispered. Scorpius knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "She saved us. Again." For a long while neither moved. Then softly from within the hourglass came a final whisper, so faint it might have been only the wind. "Just until dawn." And as the first light of morning touched the castle's towers, Hogwarts stood whole once more, timeless, eternal, and haunted by love, stronger than even the flow of time itself. Summer crept upon Hogwarts quietly that year, carrying with it the scent of wild flowers and the murmuring of the lake against the stones. Yet though the skies were blue and the air soft, the castle itself seemed oddly subdued, as though resting after too long a struggle. The shadows under the archways lay thicker than usual, and sometimes the walls whispered names when no one was near. The students felt it too. That faint unease that came when the wind turned cold for no reason, or when a corridor seemed longer than it had the day before. But none could say why. Only Albus and Scorpius knew the truth, and they had sworn never to speak of it. It had been nearly 2 months since the last disturbance, 2 months since Albus had tried and failed to bring Rose back from the hourglass. Since then, he had grown quieter. His laughter came less easily. His eyes often turned toward the great hall, as though drawn by a gravity he could not resist. Scorpius watched him carefully. They still studied together, still shared late-night talks in the Slytherin common room, but there was a gulf now, one filled with unspoken things. One evening, as the sun bled red across the mountains, Albus sat by the window, the open page of a charms text untouched before him. Scorpius entered carrying 2 mugs of steaming tea. "You haven't eaten," he said, setting one down beside him. Albus didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the last light of day slipped behind the forest. "She's not coming back, Albus," Scorpius said gently. "I know. Then why do you keep looking for her?" "Because I can still feel her." Scorpius exhaled softly. "You're sure it's not guilt?" At that, Albus finally turned, his green eyes glinting like broken glass. "You think I'm imagining her?" "No," Scorpius said carefully. "I think you're hearing what the castle wants you to hear." Albus stood abruptly. "She is the castle. She saved it. You said so yourself." "I said she became part of it," Scorpius corrected, "but that doesn't mean she's alive in there. Magic like that doesn't preserve. It transforms." Albus's hands clenched at his sides. "You talk like you know, but you don't." He left before Scorpius could reply, his footsteps echoing through the long corridors. That night the castle slept uneasily. A storm brewed beyond the hills, and lightning flashed across the towers. Albus wandered through the halls without destination, his robes whispering against the stone. He passed sleeping portraits and silent suits of armor, each watching him with the stillness of a held breath. He reached the great hall just as thunder rolled over the mountains. The doors opened at his touch, revealing the hourglass gleaming in the dim torchlight. The sands glowed faintly now, silver and gold intertwined, like moonlight captured in motion. He approached slowly, his reflection rippling across its curved surface. "I know you're here," he said softly. "I can feel you." For a long while, nothing happened. The torches flickered. The storm raged outside. Then faintly the sands shifted. A shape formed. Delicate, blurred, but unmistakable. Her. Rose, he whispered. The figure's lips moved. The sound came faintly as if through layers of water. Albus, emotion surged in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely, "for everything. You tried to save me," he nodded, "and failed." Her voice came again, softer. "You didn't fail. You gave me time." Lightning flashed, and for an instant, he thought he saw her hand pressed against the glass. He reached out instinctively, his fingers brushing the cold surface. "You have to stop coming here," she whispered. "Every time you do, it wakes the hourglass." "I can't just forget you," he said, tears pricking his eyes. "You're not meant to forget. You're meant to live." The storm intensified, thunder shaking the very floor. The glass trembled beneath his hand, a faint crack spreading along its edge. "Rose?" The light within the hourglass flared, and her image began to fade. "Please, don't let it turn again." "Wait!" But the hall went dark. The hourglass stilled. The storm outside broke, hammering against the windows. Albus sank to the floor, breathing hard. The words echoed through his mind. "Don't let it turn again." The next morning he went straight to McGonagall's office. The headmistress looked up from a stack of parchment as he entered. "Mr. Potter, to what do I owe this uncharacteristically early visit?" "I need to know about the Founder's relics," he said quickly, "especially the hourglass." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That subject is restricted for a reason. I think it's waking again." The pen in her hand paused mid-motion. "What did you say?" He explained what he'd seen, every detail. When he finished, McGonagall's expression had gone pale. "I feared this," she murmured. "Power like that cannot simply sleep. The castle draws strength from it, but the balance is delicate. If the flow turns against itself again, what happens? Hogwarts unravels piece by piece until nothing remains but memory." Albus swallowed. "Then we have to stop it." "Perhaps," she said slowly, "but not as you think. The magic was bound by Salazar Slytherin himself. It cannot be undone by force." "Then how?" McGonagall studied him for a long time before answering. "By choice. The one who commands the castle's heart must surrender their will to it completely. Rose Weasley did that once, but now the hourglass stirs her, which means her sacrifice is weakening." Albus's breath caught. "You mean she's fading?" McGonagall said quietly. "The castle will consume what remains of her, if nothing is done." He rose to his feet. "Then I'll take her place." The old witch's gaze hardened. "You would condemn yourself to eternity within stone and memory? If it means she can rest, yes." McGonagall stood slowly. "You bear your father's stubbornness, Mr. Potter. I cannot stop you, but know this. Once you enter that hourglass, there is no return." "I understand," she sighed deeply. "Then Merlin help you." That night the castle watched as Albus Potter walked once more into the great hall. The moonlight through the windows gleamed like liquid silver, spilling across the floor. The hourglass pulsed faintly as though aware of his presence. He stood before it and whispered, "Let me take her place." The sands swirled faster, glowing with fierce light. The hum in the air deepened to a roar. "Please," he said again, his voice breaking, "let her go." The hourglass flared, and from within came a voice. Not Rose's this time, but older, heavier, like the weight of time itself. A life for a life, a memory for a memory. So it was, and so it shall be. The floor trembled, the walls cracked, the hourglass lifted from its pedestal, spinning slowly. And then, as the light consumed him, Albus thought he saw her one last time, standing beside him, smiling as she reached out her hand. "Just until dawn," she whispered. The light exploded. When it faded, the hall was silent once more. The hourglass stood whole and perfect, its sands turning peacefully. But now, if one looked closely, they would see two shadows within the glass, standing together, hand in hand, as time flowed forever around them. And each morning, when dawn touched the towers, Hogwarts sang with a faint, gentle chime, a song of memory, sacrifice, and love that no clock would ever measure. Years passed, though within Hogwarts time never quite flowed as it did in the world beyond its gates. Seasons came and went, students grew and graduated, yet beneath the castle's stone heart, the hourglass of Salazar turned with a slow, eternal rhythm, untouched by dust or decay. And still, each dawn, when the first rays of light touched the great hall's windows, a soft, silvery chime echoed through the corridors, faint, musical, and unending. The professors spoke of it little, though every one of them felt it. Some said it was the ancient magic of the founders, reminding the castle who it was. Others whispered that it was the echo of a promise kept, or perhaps of one never broken. Only one person living knew the truth: Scorpius Malfoy. He had remained at Hogwarts long after his classmates departed. At first he stayed on as a researcher under Professor Longbottom, studying the castle's wards and protective enchantments. But after a time his purpose had grown quieter, more personal. He could not bring himself to leave the place where his two closest friends had become part of the school's very soul. Every morning he would walk the halls before the students woke, listening for that single perfect chime at dawn. And every morning he would stop before the hourglass of Salazar, bow his head, and whisper, "Good morning, you two." No one else knew why he did it. No one else saw the faint shimmer that moved within the hourglass, the twin figures, their hands joined, surrounded by drifting silver sand. It was on one such morning many years later that he noticed the change. The chime came later than usual, softer, trembling, as though weakened by distance. The sands within the hourglass, which had always fallen steady and calm, began to flicker, reversing their flow for the briefest of moments before righting again. Scorpius frowned. "That's not good." He hurried to the headmistress's office. The current head, a sharp-eyed witch named Professor Ainsley, listened with growing concern as he explained. "You believe the hourglass is failing?" she asked. "I believe it's shifting," he replied. "Its magic was stable for decades, but something's changed. The rhythm is off. It's unmoored. What would cause such a thing?" "Time," he said simply. "The castle's heart was never meant to bear the weight of two souls forever." Ainsley folded her hands. "Then what do we do?" Scorpius hesitated. "If the flow collapses, it could unravel Hogwarts wards again. We'd lose everything. I'll need to go down there, into the chamber beneath the hall, and see if I can strengthen the seal." The headmistress's brow furrowed. "That chamber was sealed centuries ago. It can't be opened." Scorpius smiled faintly. "It can, if you ask politely." That night, under the light of a crescent moon, Scorpius descended the spiral staircase beneath the great hall, the same passage his friends had taken long ago. The air grew colder as he went. thick with the scent of ancient stone and sleeping magic. He reached the bottom and stepped into the vast chamber. The statues of the founders still stood in their eternal watch, their stone faces grave, but the air thrummed faintly, alive with tension. The hourglass towered in the center, luminous in the dark. Scorpius approached slowly. The sands were moving faster now, swirling with streaks of gold and shadow. He reached out a trembling hand and whispered, "Rose, Albus, can you hear me?" For a moment there was nothing. Then the sands stilled, and faintly a voice answered. "Scorpius." His breath caught. "Rose?" "It's hard to speak," she said, her voice echoing like wind through hollow glass. "The magic is changing." Another voice joined hers, softer, lower, but steady. "It's not time for you to be here, Albus." Scorpius swallowed hard. "You think I'd leave you two down here forever? Not a chance. The hourglass is breaking. You're both being pulled apart." "We know. Then let me help." "You can't. The hourglass was meant to keep Hogwarts alive, not us. If the balance fails..." Rose's voice faded for a moment, then returned, thinner. "Scorpius, you have to break it." He stared up at the great glass tower. "If I break it, the castle dies." "No," Albus said. "If you break it now, the castle will live. We gave it enough of ourselves to last." The air trembled. The sands began to surge upward in violent spirals, the light growing painfully bright. Scorpius's heart pounded. "You want me to destroy it? To destroy you?" "To set us free," Rose whispered. "Please, it's the only way." He backed away, shaking his head. I can't lose you again." But even as he spoke, the chamber began to quake. Cracks spread along the floor, light spilling through them like molten gold. The statues of the founders shuddered, dust falling from their robes. Then through the noise came one last whisper. "Just until dawn." Scorpius froze. Those were the words Rose had said on the night she saved them all. He closed his eyes, tears burning behind them. "All right," he said softly, "just until dawn." He raised his wand. Reducto. The spell struck the glass. For an instant, nothing happened. Then the hourglass shattered, exploding in a storm of silver sand and light. The force threw him backward, and the world vanished into brilliance. When he awoke, the chamber was gone. He lay in the great hall, the morning light streaming through the tall windows. The air felt warm, peaceful. Around him the castle hummed softly, like a song well remembered. The hourglass was no longer there. In its place stood a single silver thread, floating in midair, twisting gently like smoke. Scorpius rose unsteadily and reached out. When his fingers brushed it, a rush of warmth filled him. Laughter, sunlight, the echo of voices long gone. He heard Rose's gentle laugh, Albus's stubborn grin, and then a whisper, "Thank you." The thread dissolved, scattering into light that drifted upward and vanished into the ceiling. Scorpius sank to his knees, smiling through his tears. "Goodbye, my friends." Outside, the dawn bells rang. For the first time in years, there was no answering chime, no echo of glass. Only the clean, bright sound of morning. Hogwarts endured. Generations of students came and went, their laughter filling the halls, their dreams woven into the castle's magic. None remembered the night the hourglass was broken, though some swore that in the quiet hours before dawn they sometimes saw two faint figures walking the corridors. A boy and a girl, hand in hand, their faces peaceful, their steps unhurried. And the castle, timeless and eternal, kept watch over them all, its heart now free. for the sands of time, once bound, had finally found their rest. Many years had passed since the hourglass of Salazar had shattered beneath the great hall. The tale of that night had become a whisper among the older portraits, a story told by the castle itself when the wind moaned through the corridors at midnight. To the students of later generations, it was no more than a legend, a tale of two brave souls who vanished into light to save Hogwarts from time's undoing. But Hogwarts remembered, it always did, in the deepest hours before dawn, when even the ghosts drifted silently through the walls. The castle dreamed. It dreamed of the storm, of the whispering corridors, of a girl with fire in her hair, and a boy with the stubborn courage of his father's line. It dreamed of friendship, stronger than fear, of sacrifice freely given, of the turning of the glass and the stilling of time. And within those dreams, it kept them safe. The years moved on. The world outside the castle grew louder, faster, filled with machines and lights that never dimmed. Yet Hogwarts remained what it had always been, a sanctuary of magic hidden between the folds of time, untouched by the noise of the modern world. In those days, the headmistress was a clever and kind woman named Eleanora Woodcroft, a descendant of one of the old wizarding families of Scotland. She loved the school fiercely, and though she laughed easily, there were lines of care about her eyes that deepened whenever the wind carried strange whispers through the halls. For whispers there still were, faint, fleeting, but never gone. One night, when the sky was heavy with summer rain, Eleanora left her office and made her way down to the great hall. Her slippers made no sound on the flagstones, and her wand cast only the gentlest glow. The candles overhead burned low, their flames bending toward her as though in greeting. At the far end of the hall, where the hourglass of Salazar had once stood, the air shimmered faintly. There was no relic now, no glass, no pedestal. But sometimes, when the night was very still, a faint spiral of light appeared there, turning slowly, endlessly, as though some fragment of its magic lingered on. Eleanora paused before it, her breath misting in the chill air. "So it's true," she murmured. "You never really left." A whisper answered, not in words but in warmth, a breath of memory brushing against her mind. She saw for a moment a flash of red hair and green eyes, laughter echoing faintly as though from across a century. "Rose Weasley," she said softly. "Albus Potter, your story's still told." The light flickered gently like a heartbeat. Eleanora smiled sadly. "The castle misses you. We all do." As she turned to leave, she caught the faintest murmur, so soft she might have imagined it. "Just until dawn?" The headmistress paused, her eyes widening. The voice had been clear as morning. She looked back, but the light had faded. Only the empty stones remained, glowing faintly with the first gray hint of dawn. Years became decades. The world outside changed again, but within Hogwarts, the rhythm of learning, laughter, and loss continued. New faces came, bright with wonder, and departed with hearts full of memories. Yet in every generation, there was always one student, sometimes two, who felt the old magic stirring. It would begin with dreams. A girl might wake in the middle of the night, heart pounding, certain she had heard someone whisper her name. A boy might linger after class, drawn by a melody that seemed to drift from the very walls. They would wander the halls by moonlight and find themselves before the same place, the end of the great hall where the hourglass had once stood, and there they would see it, a faint shimmer of light swirling like dust in sunlight. Some would reach out, curious, but the light would fade before they touched it. Others would simply stand and listen. Those were the ones who sometimes heard it, the soft echo of laughter, the sound of two young voices speaking low. No one ever saw the figures clearly, but the stories spread nonetheless. "They say Hogwarts is haunted by love," the students whispered. "Not ghosts, but memories, two who gave themselves to the castle and stayed to keep it safe. And when storms came and lightning struck the towers, when the wards shuddered under the strain of the world's changing tides, the shimmer of light in the great hall would grow brighter. No matter how fierce the wind or how loud the thunder, Hogwarts always held. The castle never fell." One summer evening, centuries later, when the castle was older than all who dwelled within it, a young witch named Lyra Finnegan stood at the edge of the great hall, staring at the faint glow on the stones. She was small and quick-witted, with a shock of curly brown hair and an untamable curiosity that often earned her detentions. Her professor said she had the same look in her eyes that Albus Potter once had, an unwillingness to accept what could not be changed. She had come because of a dream. In it, a voice had said her name, gentle and distant. "Lyra, it's time." Now, as she watched the light spiral slowly, she whispered, "What's time for what?" The air stirred. The shimmer brightened, and then, for the first time in hundreds of years, the light formed into shapes, two figures, faint as mist. One tall, with tousled hair and kind eyes, the other radiant, her hair like fire and her smile like sunrise. Lyra gasped, "You're real?" The woman's voice was soft as wind through glass. "Real enough?" The man nodded. "You shouldn't be afraid. The castle called you here." "Why me?" Lyra whispered. The two exchanged a glance. "Because time turns again," said Rose Weasley. "The magic we left is fading." Lyra's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "The world has changed too much," Albus said. "Hogwarts is strong, but it needs a heart to guide it, someone to carry its memory." Rose stepped closer, her eyes bright. "You were chosen. You can feel the castle, can't you? The hum beneath your feet, the warmth in the walls." Lyra nodded, trembling. "Then you know what to do," Rose said gently. "The choice is always the same, to keep time turning or to let it stop." Lyra hesitated. "If I choose, will I become like you?" Rose's smile was both sad and proud. "You'll become part of something greater." The light around them began to swirl faster, growing brighter, the air filled with the sound of the dawn chime. Clear, pure, endless. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped into the light. When the morning came, the castle awoke to peace. The shimmer at the end of the great hall was gone. The stones were smooth, unmarked, but as the sun rose above the lake, Hogwarts itself seemed to glow from within, alive and whole in a way it hadn't been for centuries. And that morning, when the bells rang to welcome the new day, the castle sang not one chime, but three, soft silver tones, intertwined like voices in harmony. Those who heard it smiled without knowing why. Somewhere in the heart of Hogwarts, time turned once more. Three figures now walked its unseen halls, Rose, Albus, and Lyra, guardians of the school's soul, bound together by the oldest magic of all. And when the sun touched the towers, their voices rose in the whisper that had outlasted centuries, just until dawn.